New at 6, South Carolina's Attorney General is requesting the ticketing website Eventbrite answer questions about its policies.
Now, the AG says the company deplatformed a speaker coming to the upstate next month. The group hosting this event says that same event, Eventbrite, took their event off the site. A Palmetto family is hosting Chloe Cole. She's an activist who's been outspoken against allowing minors to transition. They posted on Facebook saying in part, quote, "This event is being held to discuss the dangers of transgenderism for minors and specifically to foster a movement to stop the genital mutilation of minors in South Carolina and across the country who are too young to consent to such procedures and therapies." But Eventbrite has deemed it as an event that violates their policy on hateful, violent, and dangerous events. The Attorney General calling for answers from this ticketing website. Attorney General Alan Wilson released a statement saying, quote, "Big tech suppressing and censoring viewpoints it does not agree with is not a new problem, but the examples continue to increase. Companies do not have to agree with their consumers, but they absolutely should not silence one viewpoint and promote another." Now, 18 other states joined AG Wilson in South Carolina and asking for accountability from Eventbrite. We reached out to them for a statement about this, and we are still waiting for a response.